electric vehicles seem to be making a big foray into India. More and more people, we go by data, and we'll quickly run through data in a while from now. But if you look at data suggests that more and more people are now buying electric vehicle. There is a foray, and a big one at that, not just in the two-wheeler electric market, which has a penetration of more than 5% at the moment, and in certain states like Maharashtra and Goa, more than 10%. It's the four-wheeler EVs that still has a void, and a lot of other companies are looking to capture that void, including your Nissan, Renault and MG Motors.
That's right, Shweta. So what we've really seen in the whole EV space is that the government has been very proactive in setting a target that by 2030 we need 30% of our fleet, four-wheeler fleet, to be electric. We need 100% of our public transportation to be electric, and we need about 70 to 80% of our two-wheelers to be electric. Now, given that 2030 target, in 2023 we are still at a very low penetration when it comes to electric four-wheelers being bought by consumers, right? So now what this really opens up for foreign auto players is the fact that there are companies like Volkswagen, there are companies like MG Motor, Renault, Nissan, MG being an exception, but the other three that I named had to exit operations from India because A, they were faced with higher taxes because they were not completely making in India. They were importing engines, they were importing other components. Then there was stiff competition on account of prices per se, because their cars were more expensive than the conventional fuel cars offered by the likes of, let's say, Hyundai and Maruti. And in addition to that, there was obviously, they were in an environment where the market leader was leaps and bounds ahead of them, and hence it was next to impossible for them to compete in the short run. And given what was happening globally also with these companies, mostly based out of the Europe zone, where there hasn't been great growth over the last 4 years, they didn't have enough deep pockets to continue competing in India against these incumbent players. As a result of which they had to exit India. Now with EVs and a target set for EVs by the government of India and incentives on setting up EV manufacturing plants across the country, it makes an ideal case for them to make a comeback into India and compete at a level playing field in a market which is nascent right now, not just in India but the world over, and bring in new technologies and play at par. So I think it opens up doors for these international companies to make a second bet into India, make their foray into India, take advantage of all subsidies that the government offers by way of PLI, etc., and start manufacturing in India and compete a second time and try and sell in India and create a market for themselves.
Okay. Do you know, Rakesh, we're looking at electric vehicle penetration stands at about 49,800 units last year, which is barely 1.3% of the 3.8 million passenger vehicles sold in India. So we're looking at a very low penetration. Does it make any sense, business sense, for these companies to come back? And I think, alluding to what Karthik said, there are opportunities here. A lower penetration also means greater opportunity for these companies to come back, assert themselves, and come up with a proposition, a car which is, and EVs, because we were talking about EVs, EVs are expensive, and that's one of the reasons why there is a lower penetration. So come up with a car that perhaps doesn't burn a hole in my pocket if I'm going to go and buy it.
Well, I'm not sure about the pricing. I think it'll continue to stay a little ahead of the curve, but the market is ahead of the curve, and there is a proof of the idea, what we call in a business model. If these companies exited because there was stiff competition from Maruti, they could face up to one or two big players. Now Tata as a case study has demonstrated the power of EVs. Remember, Tata Motors had become a laggard in the Indian market, mostly Indicas and limited success that it had. Nano was a failure, unfortunately. So if Tata has been able to jump the ladder and get into the leader bucket purely on the EV rush, all these big global companies believe that they have a similar chance. And so in that sense, the Renaults and Nissans of the world would ultimately look at the Tata example. And Hyundai again is investing big ticket now in EVs, which it has not done so far. MG Motors is ramping up its capability. Tata is again, going to bring about many more models. Only Maruti, as the market leader, is little delayed, and I think they have a 2025 launch for EV. But on that, I think they'll also perk up. So in that sense, it's good news for India in many ways, as Karthik mentioned. We have a certain target to meet, and we have a certain commitment to be, mobility being environment fundamentally, in that sense, all these play up to growing the Indian passenger car market, which is one of the largest in the world today. If we, have a 1.3 percentage, share of EV markets today, if it continues to grow and parallelly all other segments, the traditional fuel cars keep going, a diesel is absolutely out, as we have discussed in the
Okay.
past. So EVs and petrol and EV cars, so it's one more leg up for the Indian auto in the Indian passenger car market.
Okay.
The more the merrier.
Right. And Karthik, I think it's not just India is underpenetrated, and that's the reason why these auto majors are looking to come back to India or looking to make a foray in India in a big way. It's also because of the geopolitical situation that we're looking at. Largely, China was the manufacturing hub for many of these auto majors, but with US-China ties, becoming sour day after day, many of these companies are looking for an alternative manufacturing hub, and India is presenting an opportunity by the way of cash incentives, as you mentioned, but also rolling out a red carpet for all these companies. The Modi government, if you to give it to Modi government, you have to give it to them for making sure that they are manufacturing, they are encouraging manufacturers to come to India and set up base in India.
You're right, Shweta. So I think all geopolitical events, vagaries right now are working in India's favor. And you're right. I think the pivot that India decided to take, and not a pivot, in fact, the addition India decided to take, that we are not going to be a services-only economy, and we will also be an equally robust manufacturing-based economy, is finally 7, 8 years, 9 years down the line, it is showing some green shoots. But I think there's one more angle here, and that is that, up until maybe 5 years back, 6 years back, you did not have a level playing field in the auto industry, because you had a Maruti Suzuki which had been in the market for about 30 years and commanded the lion's share. And a distant second was Hyundai Motors. Tata, until it bought JLR, improved its design, improved its overall market presence, it did not really, tinker too much with the imagination of Indians. But now we are in a situation that the technology is new, the environment is new. There is a target set that 30% of all vehicles sold, four-wheelers sold in India will be electric. And the likes of Maruti and Hyundai, even Hyundai, for example, it is investing about 20,000 crore rupees in a new plant in Tamil Nadu. But that is going to yield results only 3 years, 4 years down the line. MG Motors, on the other hand, is investing in a second plant in India, spending something like, I think, what, $607 million or something, which is going to further ramp up its electric vehicle production. And you're talking about low-cost electric vehicles. MG just last month launched MG Comet, which is actually, I mean, it's pretty much the Tata Nano of yesteryears in an electric format. It's a small car, very compact, God knows what kind of safety features it has. But the fact is that, yeah, low-cost EVs are also making an entry into India. And in fact, India was among the first countries in the world to actually have a small size electric vehicles, which was founded by this gentleman called Chetan Maini. I'm forgetting the name of the car, which eventually got bought over by Mahindra and got rebranded as E2O. It was a low-cost, small EV. And
a very
India
compact
has
EV.
a very compact EV, right? And Chetan Maini had designed this EV way back, I think, in late 2008, 2009 perhaps. And this was a car that was an electric car, ran in India, and you still see some of those remnant cars plying on the road. So I think low cost is definitely an option, but overall the whole environment has changed.
And infrastructure. I think it's very important to also mention that a lot of us don't
Reva, sorry, the car was called Reva.
Reva, okay. And a lot of us don't end up buying EVs because of the problems with charging stations. We don't know where they are. There's not much of there's not much of knowledge. There's not much of information around charging stations.
I don't think we should fret too much about it. When the first set of Maruti 800s got sold in India, or Ambassadors got sold in India, did we have fuel stations every 1 kilometer? We did not. Infrastructure will obviously come up as demand goes up. As more and more electric vehicles get sold, there is going to be more demand for charging stations to come up, and charging stations will come up. In fact, in cities, office complexes, malls, residential apartments will all be equipped with charging stations. So you actually don't need them to be on the road unless you're undertaking a long journey. And for that, I think a little bit of planning will obviously go in, both at the driver's end as well as at the government's end, to make that facility available. And then add to that battery swapping. So I think
Battery
the
swapping.
whole price dynamics are going to change when you buy an electric car. You are actually not buying a battery along with it, which is incidentally about 50% of the cost, but you are leasing a battery. And every time you go to a charging station, instead of spending an hour charging your battery, you swap your
Swap
battery
the
with
battery.
another fully charged battery and you continue your journey.
Okay.
So I think
Do you know-
charging stations, battery swapping, e-mobility, highways, all this is working in tandem, and I think we are in an okay place.
You know, I like your optimism around the entire EV infrastructure, and you're right. It will happen. It will happen gradually. It may not have happened just as yet, but as more and more people end up buying EVs, there's more information out there. That there is more penetration of EVs. We'll have more charging stations. We'll have more facilities and knowledge around battery swapping. But it's not there just as yet. But I'm very hopeful with Renault, Nissan. You know, at least earmarking some money that they are hoping to invest in India to build cars, and I think that's the starting
That's right.
point.
That's
But
right.
you know, Rakesh, coming to you, it's not going to be easy, is it? Because you've got your inbred domestic Tatas and Mahindras who are not going to be very happy with, you know, foreign companies and coming to claim their market share, which is relatively very small as of now, including, you know, what happened with Tesla. We understand Tesla wanted to make a sweet deal with the government of India. The government of India did not agree. They now sent their representatives back. There is news, of course, of them coming up in India, manufacturing here, finding local partners. All of that, of course, in the works. Nothing is confirmed so far, but it is going to be a tough road because it's a small market and you already have indigenous players working to get more and more, you know, customers on board.
Well, I mean, I don't think we have a mood today in the country where they'll allow any protectionist kind of a tendency. At least in this sector, I think the government is very committed to the EV play, and it wouldn't, unnecessarily give any leeway to the buyers, not allow the players to come. I mean, market forces have to operate. They have been operating in this space. We have had exits. People have come back. There's this famous story about Fiat making a return to India and then return again, exit again, return again. So that's where the market forces are at play. My sense is that what is important is that more and more players come. I'm not too bullish on the China piece right away because it's in the long form. It's in the medium and long range. As of now, I don't see many players straight away jumping China and coming to India to set up EV plants in India. Yes, for Tesla's entry into India, they're bringing about knockdown cars from China was a sensitivity issue, but otherwise it will take some time. My own view is that Karthik is optimistic. I'm also optimistic, but you know what is the problem? Setting up a parallel, kind of a task force, mission force. If EV is the big play in India from a policy framework, we need a matching or maybe even stronger considered and concerted plan when it comes to actually setting up that EV and infrastructure that is required to make it happen.
Rakesh, we'll try and get you back. We will try and get you back in a better weather condition. But I think essentially what Rakesh is saying that he's optimistic just like you are, and there is a.
No, I think he's saying that a parallel task force
course,
to
a parallel
work
task
on
force
charging
will also
stations,
work.
e-mobility,
That is
highways, etc. My only response to that, if Rakesh can still hear me, is that I think government will make its investments in a tapered manner. There is no merit really in putting in all the money in creating the infrastructure. If let's say the demand for auto electric vehicles does not prop up, if there is an event where the technology being brought into India to make these cars happens to not go through, so I think it's
Fair
playing
enough,
it's
yeah.
playing almost at par with EV makers, with automakers, and as and when more and more cars roll out of factories and come on Indian roads, you have more charging stations, more battery swapping infrastructure coming up in parallel. So I think
Okay.
the wait time, statistical model of wait time remains pretty much the same. There you wait for 10 minutes, let's say, in a queue to charge your to refuel your car or to, let's say, charge your battery. The wait time will be the same. More number of cars, more number of stations, same amount of wait time.
Okay.
So I think that's how it's being played out.
So-
Rather than infusing all capital in one go, building this huge infrastructure, that may have the potential of not having too many takers down the road.
Absolutely.
And evolving technology. So, there
course.
could be I mean, look at what happened with Tesla, for example. In the US, Tesla, for the first time, has allowed General Motors to also be partakers in the same EV infrastructure that Tesla has built. Now, GM cars to get charged at Tesla stations will need an adapter.
I wanted to come to that, and so I wanted to understand. The onus, of course, of building infrastructure largely lies with the government, as per our view. But could there, in future, be a difference? The task force that we're talking about to create that infrastructure, could that come from private players who are looking to make India a market, who are hoping that more vehicles will be sold, but also simultaneously build infrastructure around EVs?
Yeah, absolutely. I see no reason why not. In fact, you have PSUs that dominate fuel stations, right? But you have had private players also dab into fuel stations, did not meet much success, but I see no reason for failures of the past to get repeated with greater learning, with more opportunity, and with progressive thinking in the government corners as well to have industry partake in building infrastructure. I think it's not going to be a sector which is going to be restricted to the government to build alone. And there is going to be equal, if not more, private participation as well. It's just that standards have to be worked out. Different batteries, different models will have different chargers, different adapters. I think all those standards will have to be worked on, and that should be the job of the task force right now, as opposed to blindly going and doing carpet bombing across highways in India, building these infrastructures, spending your tax money and my tax money and Rakesh's tax money, right? I think a staggered approach in sync with the rollout of electric vehicles on the roads in India seems like the best strategy to me.
Okay, but the road, of course, is paved for electric vehicles in India, as more and more private firms are now looking to foray into market. It is an under-penetrated market, less than 2%, but with more EV players now betting on India, we could see that number going up in the future.